In the electrifying Iron Man Chronicles, Tony Stark engineers a daring escape from the clutches of the Afghan army using his Mark I suit. Shockingly, he uncovers Obadiah's sinister weapon dealings. Fueled by a sense of responsibility, Tony races against time, crafting the advanced Mark II and III suits to thwart Obadiah's destructive plans. Amid the chaos, a surprise gift from Pepper adds a poignant twist to Tony's high-stakes mission. If you haven't saw the part 1 and 2 of this series, click the link in description and watch the whole story. So without any delay, let's continue. As Tony recovers from his crash landing, he opens the container that Pepper left at the back of in advance. Inner is the Mark I arc reactor encased as a trophy with the message proof that Tony Stark has a heart. Tony analyzes more information and makes a decision to rebuild the suit. The usage of gold titanium from an vintage project to clear up the icing and weight issues. He instructs Jarvis to feature some hot rod crimson trim to the subsequent suit, codenamed Mark III, then leaves to wait his annual benefit dinner whilst the brand new fit is being assembled and painted at the charity event. Tony meets with Agent Coulson, who nevertheless wants to find out about Tony's incident. Tony leaves to dance with Pepper, and they proportion a moment collectively in the moonlight. Christina, the reporter Tony slept with previous to leaving for Afghanistan, angrily confronts him, displaying him photos of his weapons being used by a terrorist group yesterday in the remote Afghan town of Gulmira. Yinsen's domestic village, Tony confronts Obadiah on the problem, and Obadiah reveals that he's the one who filed the injunction towards Tony. Obadiah calls himself an ironmonger and has no qualms approximately selling Stark Industries weapons to both sides of the struggle. Tony returns domestic live it while there, he watches information reports of the worsening situation inside the Gulmira area. He tests modifications to his hand repulsors, turning them right into a weapon and blasting out numerous glass panes. When the new match is completed, it's far suited to his body. With the aid of an automatic robotic system, Stark flies off to Gulmira at hypersonic velocity, decided to proper his employer's wrongs. In Gulmira, terrorists are rounding up civilians for capture and execution, when Tony suggests up his Mark II armor is more than a suit for them. Within seconds, he defeats the primary organization of terrorists, the use of his advanced weapons to take out several without any innocent casualties. He leaves the institution's chief, Raz's chief lieutenant, alive and defenseless for the villagers to take their revenge on. While flying to locate his guns, Iron Man is shot down via a tank shell. When he receives up, a second shell slightly misses him. He responds with the aid of capturing a mini-missile on the tank, destroying it using the palm repulsors he designed. He destroys the captured Jericho missiles after they're demolished. Raza arrives in time to see Tony fly off. CENTCOM at Edwards Air Force Base detects Tony in flight, mistaking him for a rogue drone. Colonel Rhodes is asked approximately the repute of any new developments. He contacts Tony, who claims that he knows not anything about what's occurring. In the meantime, Tony is faced via two F-22 Raptors. He tries to outrun the jets, however, they're too much for him. Tony calls Rhodes and reveals that he is accountable for the unidentified craft. Rhodey is livid, approximately Tony sending an unauthorized device and horrified, while Tony explains that the equipment is definitely himself. In his new invention, Tony is hit by using one fighter jet, sending him flying into the wing of the second one jet. The pilot is pressured to eject, however, his parachute fails to open. Iron Man, nonetheless below fire, flies in and deploys the parachute in time to rescue the pilot. Tony convinces Rhodey to bypass off what came about with the jets as a training exercise. After Tony arrives again at home, Pepper catches him whilst the robot system is doing away with his match. The disassembly is not going as well as the assembly, and Tony quips that Pepper has visited him in situations that had been much worse. Meanwhile, Stain will pay a visit to the Ten Rings camp, revealing he'd paid the organization to seize and kill Tony. However, they realized who Tony was and had demanded a much better price after they made their tape. Using a high-powered sonic device that induces temporary paralysis, Stain immobilizes Raza and takes the remnants of the Mark Y armor they've collected. Stain then has his men execute anybody within the camp. Tony attempts to talk Pepper into assisting him, believing that nothing else subjects but saving the people who he installed harm's way. Pepper is moved by using Tony's dedication and has the same opinion. She is going into Obadiah's workplace with a flash force programmed to replicate documents from the PC. As Pepper sifts via saved files, she finds a video from the terrorists proving that Obadiah turned into liable for Tony C's. Obadiah comes into the workplace and sees her on the computer. However, Pepper manages to hide what she is virtually doing. She leaves the workplace, but as quickly as he powers up the PC, Obadiah realizes what she turned into. As much as on the manor out, Pepper sees Agent Coulson and tells him he can have his interview at once so that he accompanies her safely out of the constructing. Obadiah meets with his group of developers who are working on his very own armored Healthy, based totally on the Mark I. They have rebuilt the components, however, they cannot miniaturize Stark's arc reactor. Stain is livid, but relents, whilst the lead developer tells him he's no longer the genius Tony is. Obadiah realizes that he has one other alternative. Stain arrives at Tony's house and paralyzes him with the sonic weapon. Obadiah yanks out the Mark II chest piece from Tony's chest, taunting him approximately how it is going to be the flagship invention in a brand new era of weaponry. After he leaves, Tony realizes that he has only one hope for survival, the preserved arc reactor that Pepper gave him as a present. He staggers down to his workshop and nearly dies at the same time as seeking to retrieve the reactor that surpassed to him through dummy. Tony gets the reactor established just as Rhodey arrives. Rhodey informs him that 5 dealers have long gone to arrest Obadiah, but Tony is aware of that isn't always nearly enough manpower. Rhodey watches Tony fit up, awestruck, on the Iron Man armor. Rhodey asks if there may be whatever Tony needs. Tony asks him to keep the skies clear. As Tony flies away, Rhodey spots the silver-colored prototype suit, the Mark II, then shakes his head and mumbles, "Next time Pepper, Coulson, and numerous other sellers arrive at Obadiah's research facility. They spot the Mark I armor and a storage location, in which something else turned into kept. Just then, a massive robot match comes to life and assaults them. It is Obadiah's counterpart suit, codenamed the Ironmonger, powered by the chest piece he stole from Tony. While Tony flies towards the research facility, Jarvis warns him that he has simplest about half electricity inside the fit, because the older chest piece wasn't designed energy. The Mark III in the course of sustained flight. Tony arrives just as Obadiah is set to execute Pepper. The two ironclad warriors start a huge, brawling struggle that spills into the streets close to Stark Industries. At the same time as Tony attempts to protect any harmless civilians, Tony flies into the upper ecosystem, drawing Obadiah along with him. Obadiah struggles, however, before long. His fit starts off and evolves to freeze up. It has the equal icing trouble that Tony's Mark II had. Obadiah begins to fall back to Earth, leaving Tony hovering above. The older arc reactor starts to lose strength unexpectedly, and Tony falls back to Earth. Touchdown on the pinnacle of his manufacturing unit, walking on auxiliary backup power. Back on the ground, Obadiah assaults Tony again. Tony manages to disable the weapons monitoring device in Obadiah's fit and evades Obadiah long enough to instruct Pepper to overload the constructing's arc reactor in order to generate a shockwave sturdy enough to disable Obadiah's suit. Pepper is hesitant, believing that Tony may also be killed. Tony manages to maintain control even as she builds up energy to the reactor. The reactor releases its shockwave, knocking out the Ironmonger Healthy, which falls into the reactor, killing Stains and destroying the reactor. Stark's authentic mini-arc reactor sparks lower back to life, allowing Tony to live on. Days later, Rhodey holds a press convention about the incident with the two robots. Tony is impressed with the call. The newspapers come up with Iron Man and plans to undertake it. Agent Coulson has released cover tales about the loss of life of Obadiah, who will die in a small plane crash whilst Tony is supposedly someplace else, and the reality about Iron Man, who could be known as Stark's bodyguard. Pepper, thanks. Coulson, however, can't keep in mind the whole call of the institution he belongs to. Coulson tells them to call it S.H.I.E.L.D. and says that they will be in touch again. Tony is going before the journalists once more and prepares to comply with the quilt story. But as he starts off evolving speaking, he throws away his notes and broadcasts. "I am Iron Man." The press is going right into a frenzy. Much later, after the credit, Tony returns home to discover a mysterious man in black, telling him that as Iron Man, Tony has grown to be part of a bigger universe. Tony asks who the person is. He turns around and introduces himself. Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Samuel L. Jackson. He's come to talk with Tony about an upcoming project called the Avenger Initiative. That's all for this part. Click the next video for more amazing content, and don't forget to subscribe the channel.